Hi, I'm Ingrid Blackburn and welcome to the Creative Grove. Today we have a fun DIY embellishment project using some embossing paste as well as some dye-based inks, creating layers and textures. So let's go ahead and get started. I have a piece of just regular white cardstock and we are going to just add a little adhesive to the back so that sticks down. I'm going to take some Dreamweaver embossing paste, and this is just regular white embossing paste. And I have a rounded spatula. We're just going to take a little bit out and we're just going to put it down. We're not going to think about it too much. Just want to create a random pattern. And this is just to provide a little bit of texture underneath our focal images. You don't need a crazy amount, but you want to have a little bit of varying texture here. So let's see if I can do this without overworking the project. It's kind of like playing with this stuff is kind of like playing with buttercream frosting. If you've ever frosted a cake before, you know that you can never quite get it exactly how you want it. So I'm just going to add a little bit more up here just to kind of balance it out a little. And that works. So now I'm going to lay this aside for about an hour to allow that to dry. I'm going to immediately clean off my palette knife and close my embossing paste. And when we come back, we'll do a little bit of quick sponging and create our embellishments for our card. I allowed this to dry overnight because it was actually rather thick, and after an hour it still was a little soft. I actually pressed down and kind of was able to move it around. I also took a heat tool to it from the back. I didn't want to take it to the front because I didn't want it to bubble, but just to kind of allow some of the deeper parts to dry a little bit. So we're going to put this to the side, and that's going to be our card front. And next we're going to do a little bit of coloring, and I just have some pieces of scrap paper that I'm not using for anything. The long strip we're going to use for red, but here we're going to do a little bit of green. So I have a couple different colors. I have forest moss, peeled paint, and pine needles. And we're going to start off with the peeled paint, which is kind of like a nice muted green. So we're just going to start off our project and just kind of sponge randomly all over the place. I'm not going to be too perfect with it because the actual texture, when you get a little bit of extra ink on here, normally when I sponge, that's not what I'm looking for at all. But in this case, I actually don't really want a crazy smooth blend. I want to have some of this interesting texture, so I'm purposely pressing down hard in spots, and you can see I'm getting a little bit of the circular tool, and I'm also blending some of it out. And then from here, I'm going to use forest moss. And this is a much darker shade, so I'll be a little bit careful with being too hard with it, and just kind of add some of that smoothness as well in here. I always like to come in with the lighter colors to blend it all out, brighten it up a little. And just grab a couple different random pieces of scraps that you have around to use. You're going to need some pretty good sized pieces. You don't want some small pieces, and we're going to create our own holly leaves. Now, I did a video on this years ago, but I'll kind of update you with this project as well on how to create your own custom holly leaves. But I kind of wanted to have a blended look, you know, some different shading going on here, and that's looking pretty cool. I like that. Now the pine needles seems to be a really traditional holly leaf color, but I don't like to do everything that's expected of me all the time, so we're going to add some variation in color, which I think would be really pretty in this project. Now to give it a little bit of a more unique look, I'm going to take this scripty background that I have, and this is an old stamp from Stampin' Up. You can use any greeting that you have, and I'm just going to put some vintage photo, which is a warm reddish brown, and just kind of get that all over. And then I'm going to take a darker brown, walnut stain, and I have part of a paper towel here that I'm just going to kind of crumple up, put into the ink, and I'm going to randomly just kind of splotch this down in spots to give it a little bit of a darkness. You could even do this with maybe a little soot black. Just make sure we have plenty of walnut stain here all over. Just kind of want that blended look. So now I'm going to take my green pieces and I'm just going to place it on here and just kind of tap it down in spots. I don't really want the writing everywhere, so that's perfect. And I'll do the same over here. And that looks good, and if I feel I need some more somewhere, I can always just tap it down in a spot there. Perfect. So we have some really cool texture going on there with that. Now before I move on, I want to get the red done as well. So I'm just going to kind of get some of this green off my surface here. And I'm going to use two red colors. I have Festive Berry Barn Door. You know, I think I'm going to even bring in some Worn Lipstick. This is kind of a pinkish color, but you know, it would work too. So give us a little bit of variation in color. And I have a smaller strip, and this is going to be for my holly berries. So I'm just going to get some of this Worn Lipstick down, and this is going to be the lightest shade. Next will be Festive Berries, which is a little bit more of a traditional Christmas red. It's a brighter red. And then we're going to come in with some Barn Door, maybe even work in a little bit of Fired Brick. Barn Door is the truest red in the Distressed family. Just going to kind of pounce this on a little for a little interest. And then we'll come in with our darkest shade, Fired Brick, and just kind of just add a little splotchiness kind of to our reds. I want some texture in this is what I'm really looking for. And just by, you know, not necessarily sponging everything through, I'll probably come through with the Festive Berries again and just blend it all out. I like the texture that just pouncing gives. So we have that very cool texture there. Now you could also do water droplets, you could do all sorts of things, and you know what, that actually might be something that would look cool on this particular piece. So I'm just going to add a little water to my hand here and just kind of flick it. Allow that to work for a second, and then I have a paper towel and I'll just quickly sop that up. And that gives it some interesting little texture there. Maybe we'll do a little bit more in some other spots. And Distress ink is made to react with water, and that's why you get this really cool reaction here. You can always take a heat tool to it as well if you want to make sure that there's no continued lightening as that dries. And this is just regular cardstock. This is not watercolor paper. So you don't want to let that water sit on there too long because of that, because it's not made to work with water. So I've cleaned off my work surface and I have some interesting pieces here. I've got a little bit of green with some of the vintage photos stamped on there, and we've got the water spots for our holly berries. Now we're going to use a series of circle punches to create the look that we're going for. For the holly berries, I think what I want is the 1/2 inch circle. So I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to punch a couple of circles. They're going to go flying all over the place. Make sure to get some of that interesting character. And those are going to be our berries. Love that. And then for our leaves, we're going to take some larger circles. Now, you'd be surprised. You'd think these are pretty good sized circle punches. Honestly, they're not going to give you huge holly leaves. If you want a really big holly leaf, you're going to need to go even bigger. So you can go as big as the 1 3/4 punch. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this piece in half. So I'm going to make 3 holly leaves here, and I'm going to start off with the 1 3/8 inch punch. And to make a holly leaf, what you really want is to create a peak here. So we have this peak that we're creating by just punching 2 circles. Now we're going to come in for the body and and we're going to come in a little bit at a steeper angle than this coming from the side. This is really more than coming from the corner up here. You're really coming from the side more here. You can always come in parts if you're unsure of how far to go, and don't feel like it has to be perfect, because holly leaves are not perfect. And then we're going to come in from the corners again at the bottom. And you don't have to make those meet. It's actually okay to have this little heel here. It gives you a little something to glue. So there's our one leaf. Now you can make these different sizes if you'd like. I think I'm going to have 2 of the same size with this 1 3/8 inch punch. Again, coming in from the corners. And don't worry if they don't meet, you can always adjust, make them meet, come in from the side. And this is what is a little easier about working with little rectangles when you're just getting started making holly leaves. And there you go. That's a great one. And I'm going to come up with a bigger one using the 1 3/4 inch punch. And I've got kind of an odd shaped piece, but that's all right. And same theory. And you see there are lots of scraps with this, so that's why you don't have to worry about being so perfect. You can always do these with scissors too. I would trace it on the reverse side and then cut it out. But you can just freehand these. These don't really have to be completely perfect. Now we have our very textured background that we created. Now to complete our card, I punched out some 3/4 inch circles because I wasn't 100% certain which size I wanted. So we have our holly leaves and we have our great background. I'm going to take a piece of vellum here and I'm going to do a little bit of tearing. So I'm right-handed, so I'm going to tear towards me because I want this great texture on the front of my piece. If I wanted it on the back side, I would tear away from me and then it would be on that side. Now if you're left-handed, you're just going to tear with your left hand towards you. It's the same concept, just different hand, different side. I'm going to flip it around and then get the other side. Now I have a relatively thin seam that I'm going to use, so I may want this to be even a little bit thinner. There we go. You could even emboss your greeting on it first if you want, and then tear around it. I'm doing it backwards for some reason. Let's find a spot for my greeting and we'll go ahead and get that embossed. First I'm going to use an embossing buddy to make sure that nothing sticks to this area. I'm going to use some Versamark ink and then we're going to emboss this in gold. This is from the new set Mixed Christmas Sentiments by Happy Little Stampers. It's a brand new stamp company. They have some great stamp sets. I encourage you to check it out. And then we'll go ahead and get that embossed in gold. Now I wanted to add a little detail to these, so I'm taking some fired brick directly to the edge here just to kind of deepen the color. It was sitting a little flat for me. I just think that when you do little things like this, it makes all the difference in the world. So let me zoom in on that so that you can see that. You can see that's just, you can have a lot of ink. I've been quite inky lately. I've got some nice detail here. And like I said, you could always do brown too. Brown would be very cool. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing to the leaves. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to use Forest Moss, which is a relatively deeper shade, and just kind of enhance these leaves a little bit. And wow, that is making all the difference in the world here. Let me show you one without. Look at the difference that makes. That makes all the difference in the world, don't you think? Now I've arranged this on how I want it on the card, and from here I'm able to then trim things up because you can see the base of this. But having those little bases is really key because it does allow you to have a little more to glue these together. And that's kind of important because you need that little tiny bit of space. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually attach my banner here. So I have an idea of where it's going to go. So I'm just going to flip my project over. Make sure that you want to make sure, because this is white, that you have your surface completely cleaned off. There's no ink on there. And then we're just going to take a very simple tape runner and just come on the edges here. And then I'm going to bend over the vellum, use a bone folder, and that's going to help to just kind of keep that there. I don't want to press too hard because remember you have all that great texture from the embossing powder on the other side. I just want to use that a little bit there. So there we go. And you got to keep in mind that this project keeps wanting to bend because I've added so much weight and moisture to this. It just has this natural desire to bend inward. So you got to keep that in mind when you're adding your vellum, so you don't want to put it on too tight. So now that we have that there, we have a place to add some glue for this. Now we have to add glue because we've got a very slick surface with vellum and we've got all this texture from the paste. So we're going to use some of the Tombow Mono Multi liquid glue, which is my favorite, as you know. You see me use it all the time. And I'm just going to add a little tiny bit of glue here to the back side. And we'll get this placed down. And this is our biggest leaf. I always want to start with my biggest one. Just kind of get that, put where it's going to go. And then I have a kind of like a medium size and a small size. Now the small size I'm gonna put down here because it's my smallest area. So this medium one, we'll just kind of overlap and put it that way. So I'm just going to need to add a little bit of glue to the back side here. I already tested it out, so I already trimmed up the bottoms. So these bottoms are going to be covered up. So I'm not going to worry about them too much. So there we go. And then this piece is going to go right there. Place that down. Now it's okay if it goes over a little bit because this is actually just a card front. It's all going to go onto something else. Now that I have all that there, I'm actually going to add a mini glue dot to the underside here, and that's going to help to hold that down. So whenever I use mini glue dots, I like to use something metal to transfer it from here to there. I find that little paper snips work well, or you can also use a paper piercer. This gives me an opportunity to just kind of slide it exactly where it needs to go. And then I can just attach it and pull that out. And that's just going to help hold that down. So now I can come in with some glue and attach my holly berries. And I love all this great texture that these have with the little water spots. It's actually the perfect embellishment for these. And you can see my goal here is to kind of cover up all the stems, which I've already done. And then I have this last final one. How's that look? Pretty cool. Now I actually decided to change the size of my card. I felt that it needed a little bit more of a bolder background, so I trimmed the top and bottom just a little tiny bit. So my card is now 3 7/8 by about 5 1/4 right here. It's actually just a little bit more than 5 1/4. So I cut a gold background so that I have about 1/8 of an inch here, and all these dimensions are going to be on my blog, so if you're looking for those, be sure to visit my blog. And while you're there, you can always sign up for our Creative Tips e-letter as well. Got a great free video series that you might enjoy, videos that you don't see on this channel right here. And if you enjoyed this video, you felt like you learned something and you want to see more from me, please go ahead and hit that thumbs up and let YouTube know that you want to see more from me. And of course, play along with the Happy Little Stampers Christmas Challenge. And there you go. How's that? That looks pretty cool. Now we're going to go ahead and pop this up just for a little extra drama onto our card. I want to make sure that this stays raised as it gets crushed through the mail system, so I'm just going to add some glue to the back side here and just add some fun foam. And then we'll go ahead and do that to the other side and get that onto our card. So stay tuned for a couple of really great close-ups, and like I said, be sure to visit the blog for all the details, the supplies I used, as well as the dimensions. So we ended up with this awesome texture. I love this just kind of random texture back here from the embossing paste. And you know, the greeting is great. They're nice and easy to stamp with. They stamp beautifully, very high quality photopolymer. And then I have these awesome leaves with some great little texture, multicolored, and of course the water droplets, which are the perfect embellishment for those holly berries. Thanks so much for joining me. I look forward to seeing you in another video soon. Be sure to subscribe to my channel as well as give me a thumbs up. See you next time. Bye-bye.